Now, very happy to say, Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent back in studio on Wednesday Night Rugby. Hello, here we are again.
Evening, Joe.
It's never really stopped for you.
I genuinely, this was the least off-season ever, with the Sexton saga, with the 20s going to the World Cup final. It does feel like a 12-month season, and the World Cup is, it's such World Cup years are always strange, but rugby never really went away this summer. Yeah,
I know, Fiona, you were working on the 20s as well on the TV, so you kind of had your head in it as well. Fiona Hayes, you're very welcome.
Good to see you, Joe. Yeah, it was flat out with the 20s. What a joy to commentate on and watch. They were absolutely outstanding. Probably came up short at the end, but I just thought they were brilliant, and it just shows what future we have ahead of us in Irish rugby.
Yeah. Who, for people who didn't get to see much of it, Fiona, who stood up and grabbed your attention without heaping pressure on young fellas?
You're putting we talked a lot about Prendergast, I suppose, before the tournament. But look, I really felt, Joe, I thought, the first game, I saw a little bit of pressure on his shoulders, but what he done after that was absolutely outstanding. Probably can work a lot in his kicking, but I just thought how we played on and off the gain line, controlled the games. The back row were exceptional. Brian Gleeson was someone who really impressed me, coming back from injury, and to just go back into the squad and really take ownership over the squad. So they obviously at the end probably weren't too happy with how they fared, but I was amazed watching them, and especially Gus McCarthy, Paddy McCarthy, the front rower, another guy. There's a lot of guys I think we might see getting URC game time next year, because they really look like they were able to play at that high level ability and looked fit and as I said, physical when it came down to it.
Okay, who gets the Rory O'Connor stamp of approval?
I mean, I do think the throughput from this team will be very high. I think a lot of them will play professional rugby, and a good number will play for Ireland. I think Paddy McCarthy's outstanding. I think Brian Gleeson's outstanding. I think Sam Prendergast is the one that everyone's talking about, but there are other players in that group. And Gus McCarthy, I was over for the final and got to see him at first hand, how he handled that defeat and how he handled the media afterwards, and a very impressive young man. And the word behind the scenes about his leadership during a very turbulent couple of weeks for a group of young men was that he was very skilled in that department, and that sets him up in good stead. It's obviously very hard to make it as a hooker in Leinster at the moment, and a lot of them may have to find different paths, and I think the warning thing with the 20s is, like, Max Deegan was World Player of the Year in 2016, but actually it's James Ryan, Jacob Stockdale, Andrew Porter and Hugo Keenan from that team who've gone on to, even though Deegan's had a good career, but he's played for Ireland, but the rest of them are the kind of established names. So we never quite know at this stage who's going to make it, but I think we can be pretty confident that a lot of the players in that Ireland-France final will play a lot of professional games, and the France team were outstanding as well. Okay. So France are going nowhere.
Yeah. Well, they can.
And just on that as well, Rory, I thought, Ronan Fox coming in at tight head. Tight heads aren't easy to find. I know we're seeing a lot more physical and big ball carriers now, and the game has evolved. But I just thought once he settled himself in after that first game, obviously he came on board, and he anchored that scrum throughout the whole tournament. I thought he was brilliant as well.
Great. Well, the conveyor belt continues. So that's tomorrow. Let's focus on today. Ireland-Italy is the 8 o'clock kickoff on Saturday, and then they will go to Portugal for a week, which I have to say, as I look out my window every day for the last what feels like 200 years, sounds like a nice way to spend a week. So they'll go to Portugal for a week, and then they'll come back and play England in Dublin, and then they'll go to Biarritz for a week, and they will play Samoa in Bayonne. Can't believe we're going back to Bayonne for a World Cup.
I mean, you wonder sometimes if anyone, if the World Cup review is ever looked at again. It does sound like they're learning from previous World Cups. A lot of the sound bites coming from Cameron, we're going to hear from Paul O'Connell later, is that they've learned from previous World Cup camps. But to go to Bayonne to play Freddie, I do know that they had trouble getting a fixture for that third game. I don't think people want to play the number one team in the world before a World Cup. It's there's a lot of the candidates are on our side of the draw as well. I think we have a reciprocal arrangement with England where we play them at every World Cup, but Wales have gone another way, so I think it has been quite hard. I think that's how they ended up with that fixture. And you get Samoa and Bayonne 2 weeks before your first World Cup game is has just disaster written all over it.
Abrasive.
Yeah, although Samoa are a very good team and they're tuning up themselves. They're not going to do anything stupid to get themselves in. Like the Bayonne team all those years ago had, that was a shot to nothing for them, and they just wanted to soften Ireland up. And I'm sure you'll have Brian in here to relive it in the next couple of weeks.
Sure we will. Long build up. Last I heard from Wales, Warren Gatland was playing crying music of babies to them as part of
dark 30 approach, isn't it?
Yeah, so who knows where they are? They're in a forest, lost somewhere.
In England on Saturday.
Are they? Okay. 42 players will become 33. That is the kind of headline figure. Paul O'Connell has been talking this week, so we might dive in and get a sense of what he had to say. He was talking about various things. We'll come to maybe the preparation more generally in a moment, because that has been one of these things which has dogged Ireland at successive or several World Cups, certainly. But he was asked naturally about the Johnny Sexton ban and about what the lack of game time is going to mean for Johnny Sexton ahead of the World Cup.
It's a big strength of his because he's had to do it so often, where he is very good at being able to come back from injury and hit the ground running. You know, I think certainly out half you need to be fit, but it's maybe not the work rate position that a back three is, or maybe even some of the forwards is. You can come in and hit the ground running pretty well, and he's been really good at that. Whenever he's come back from injuries, you know, he rarely needs a lot of games to get back up and running. It's a real strength of his. He's trained since the start of pre-season pretty much. He hasn't missed a training session, and as I said, the way we've trained, a lot of it has been rugby. You know, for sure you're missing a bit of the heavier contact part to that week to week. You know, we've no choice with that. We have to manage them and keep them injury free. So that'll be the final piece of the jigsaw for him, and I would say coming closer to the end of August, there'll probably be a bit of heavier contact put into his work in training at the end of trainings. But I think the way we train suits the scenario he's in, and I think it's a strength of his to be able to come back as well, having been out. You know, you meet Johnny on a Monday or Tuesday, and he can talk about any match that was on TV. I don't know how he gets away with it. He seems to watch an awful lot of rugby. He thinks a lot about rugby, so I think that kind of helps him hit the ground running when he comes back. So it's certainly, I'd say it's a worry for him. He wants to finish playing really, really well, and I'd say he'd love to have a few more games under his belt, but it is what it is, and as I said, it's a silver lining for our squad. It allows some guys to take ownership, so it's not something I'm worried about.
Probably a fair summation, Fiona. Not ideal, but equally not a disaster, not something they're overly worried about, given it's Sexton, given his track record in this department.
Yeah, exactly, Joe. And we've seen him being managed a lot by Leinster over the last couple of years as well. So I think the big thing about this is the way the fixtures are set for these games. So I think not playing South Africa or Scotland in the first two games actually is going to help Johnny. It might mean that he will have to play a lot more rugby than planned at the group stages. But I think with that, we might see him in the first game. They might have not want him to tug out against Romania, but I think we will see him. And with Tonga, they'll probably manage his minutes as well. So I think it's worked out well with the way those fixtures have fallen and how they're going to build him into those game time. But I think Paul has it spot on as well. I mean, they're probably doing a lot of level 2 tackle tech at training, which is, it's high intense. It's everything bar, the absolute follow through the tackle. So it's high end stuff, and he's that kind of training, get your match fitness up, and obviously nothing is like going onto a pitch, but I'd say they have him training at that high intense level, and he'll obviously miss the warm-up games, but I would imagine the first game against Romania he'll be good to go, and we'll see him get out, and that's kind of will shake the cobwebs off, because we know exactly what he can do. He's an utmost professional, and he'll be itching, I suppose, to get out in that pitch and ready to go when he's called upon.
Yeah, to jog people's memory, I know it's all kind of in the medium-term distance. So it's Ireland-Romania on the 9th. A week later, it's Ireland-Tonga. A week after that, it is South Africa. And then there's a gap week, there's a rest week. And Scotland, final game out for Ireland. How do you see it, Rory?
The Sexton thing or the overall? Look, I think he wanted to play in the warm-ups. I think the plan was to play him because he hasn't played. It will be almost 6 months since he last played a rugby game when he plays against Romania, and it means he has to start against Romania and probably feature against Tonga a week later, which maybe wasn't part of the plan. But then if we go back to the end of the Euro season and the way Munster were battle hardened, that kind of came up and they won it, maybe it's no harm that he gets into a rhythm in the World Cup and he has to play week on week. And yes, he could break down, but he could break down either way if you're trying to wrap them in cotton wool. So it's certainly not disastrous. It's not ideal, but and O'Connell's right about it in terms of, like, Johnny's probably a bit worried about it because he hasn't played for so long. But if you're going to flip it, and we know Andy Farrell loves to welcome these things and calls it adversity and kind of relishes that adversity, it's a chance to pit Jack Crowley and Ross Byrne against each other over the course of the 240 minutes of rugby before this tournament, and also get a look at Kieran Frawley. And I have a feeling that they're going to maybe get a lot of game time into Jack Crowley because of the way he finished last season. So that's the bonus, is that Johnny would have probably played a lot of these minutes because he hasn't played them so long. Well, now those minutes are available, and you've got two less experienced out halves who need games but who can play their way into having big roles at this tournament. And if Crowley's going to have a big role, if Sexton does go down at some stage, they need to get minutes into his belt at international level to get him comfortable.
There you go. That was but a taste of the full rugby conversation. As usual, you can get the full chat wherever you get your podcast. It's waiting for you right now.